Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a long, slow journey back in time. Not to the usual castles and kings, but to a place right here in North America. A place so grand and sprawling, it might make your modern cities feel a little quaint. Imagine, if you will, standing on a vast, open plain. The air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. As far as your eye can see, earthen mounds rise from the ground. Some gentle slopes, others towering like man-made mountains. You hear the distant murmur of thousands upon thousands of voices, the rhythmic thump of a game being played, the rustle of cornfields stretching to the horizon. This isn't just a village, it's an ancient metropolis, a bustling hub of life and activity. And you, my friend, might find yourself a little lost, a little overwhelmed, and, frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a day here without a friendly guide. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We are drifting back over 1,000 years, to a time when the Mississippian culture flourished in what is now the central United States. Our destination is a place called Cahokia, often referred to as North America's first true city. This wasn't just a collection of huts. It was a complex urban center, larger than London was, at the same time, around 1050 AD. Picture yourself arriving there, perhaps by canoe, gliding along one of the numerous waterways that crisscrossed the region. You'd see countless dugout canoes, laden with goods, paddling to and from the city. The sheer scale of it would be staggering, especially if you were accustomed to smaller, more dispersed settlements. Cahokia wasn't built with stone like the great European cathedrals or the Mesoamerican pyramids, but with earth, moved by hand, basket by basket, over generations. The landscape was sculpted, transformed by human will, into a monumental city. The Mississippian culture itself was a fascinating tapestry of distinct but interconnected groups, all sharing certain cultural traits, including their impressive mound building. They emerged from earlier, simpler societies, developing more complex social structures, agricultural practices, and artistic expressions. Cahokia, however, was the undisputed jewel in their crown. A center of power and population unlike anything else in North America. You might wonder, as you approach, what life was really like here. Was it peaceful? Was it chaotic? Was it a place you'd want to live, or merely visit? The answers, as with most things in history, are wonderfully nuanced. Historians still argue whether Cahokia's rise was due to a sudden religious revival or a gradual accumulation of agricultural surpluses. It was likely a combination of many factors, a perfect storm of innovation and opportunity that allowed this incredible city to bloom in the heartland of North America. The sheer density of people, the organized labor, the evidence of specialized crafts, it all points to a level of societal complexity that often surprises those who are only familiar with European or Mesoamerican historical narratives. Think of the logistics involved in feeding tens of thousands of people without modern refrigeration, or organizing the labor for colossal construction projects without heavy machinery. It puts our modern conveniences into perspective, doesn't it? The sounds, the smells, the constant hum of human activity. You'd be immersed in a world both alien and strangely familiar. As you settle into this ancient landscape, you begin to notice the rhythm of life along the mighty Mississippi. The river itself, in this era, was not just a geographic feature. It was the lifeblood of the entire Mississippian culture, a vast highway connecting diverse communities. You might hear the distant splash of a fishing weir being tended, where ingeniously designed traps funnel fish into easy capture. Imagine the subtle currents, the rich, silty water, teeming with catfish, carp, and other freshwater delicacies that formed a significant part of the Cahokian diet. The air would be punctuated by the calls of various birds, ducks, geese, and cranes drawn to the fertile floodplains. People would be everywhere along the banks, mending nets, cleaning fish, or carving new canoes from cypress logs. It's a scene of industrious, yet unhurried activity, very much unlike the frantic pace of our modern world. The Mississippi wasn't just for food, though it was the primary artery for trade and communication. Imagine the canoes laden with goods, perhaps copper from the Lake Superior region, shells from the Gulf Coast, or chert for tools from distant quarries. These goods would arrive at Cahokia, a true nexus of exchange, where people from various Mississippian groups, perhaps even some from farther afield, would meet, barter, and share news. You might see a group of traders from the north, their canoes piled high with furs, interacting with a group from the south, offering exotic bird feathers or ceremonial pottery. This intermingling of people and goods hints at a highly organized, sophisticated network that stretched across a vast geographical area, connecting disparate communities in a web of commerce and cultural exchange. Historians still argue whether this extensive trade network developed organically or was centrally managed by the elites of Cahokia. Despite the grandeur of the city, there's a surprising simplicity to the everyday tools you'd observe. Most implements were made from stone, bone, or wood, crafted with remarkable skill. You might see someone meticulously flaking a piece of chert to create a razor-sharp arrow point, or another carefully shaping a wooden hoe for cultivating maize. The efficiency with which they utilized natural resources is truly impressive. And while you might think life was hard, there was undoubtedly a sense of community, a shared purpose in building and maintaining this remarkable city. Imagine the communal effort involved in preparing a feast for a ceremonial gathering, the coordinated fishing, hunting, and harvesting, all culminating in a shared meal. It sounds a bit like an ancient, more labor-intensive potluck, doesn't it? Just try not to ask for a doggy bag. They probably wouldn't get the joke. This constant activity, the gentle hum of daily life by the river, would be your constant companion as you experienced Cahokia. The fertile lands along the river were, of course, absolutely crucial. The annual flooding of the Mississippi would replenish the soil with rich silt, making the area incredibly productive for agriculture. This natural fertilization meant that the Cahokians could grow abundant crops, particularly maize, which became the cornerstone of their diet. Without this agricultural surplus, a city of Cahokia's size simply couldn't have existed. It's a reminder that even the most complex societies are ultimately rooted in their ability to feed themselves. You'd see fields of corn stretching far into the distance, interspersed with beans and squash, a testament to their advanced understanding of cultivation and crop rotation. Now, let's talk about the absolute behemoth that anchors this ancient city. Monks Mound. As you stand before it, you'll feel a sense of humble awe. It's truly monumental, the largest earthen construction in ancient North America, dominating the landscape. Imagine a base wider than the Great Pyramid of Giza, stretching for acres, and rising in terraces over 100 feet high. You'd probably crane your neck, feeling very small, like looking up at a modern skyscraper, only this one is made entirely of earth. It's hard to fathom the sheer human effort involved. Estimates suggest it took millions of basket loads of soil carried by hand over decades, perhaps even centuries, to build this colossal structure. Think about that for a moment. No bulldozers, no hydraulic lifts, just human muscle, determination, and incredible organization. The main platform at the summit, a flat, expansive area, would have been home to a massive timber building, perhaps a grand temple or the residence of the paramount chief. From this vantage point, you would have had an unparalleled view of the entire Cahokian cityscape, stretching out beneath you like a meticulously planned model. You'd see the smaller mounds, the plaza, the homes, and the surrounding fields, all laid out in a seemingly orderly fashion. It's easy to imagine a powerful leader surveying their domain from up there, feeling the weight of their responsibility, or perhaps just enjoying the morning breeze. Historians still argue whether Monks Mound primarily served as a ceremonial center, a residential complex for the elite, or a combination of both. Its sheer size suggests multiple functions, evolving over time. But what was its purpose, beyond just being a really big hill? Monks Mound was undoubtedly the spiritual and political heart of Cahokia. It was the place where the most important ceremonies were held, where the most powerful individuals resided, and where decisions that affected the entire population were likely made. You might imagine elaborate rituals taking place on its summit, perhaps at sunrise or sunset, with hundreds or thousands of people gathered in the plaza below, looking up in reverence. The energy would have been palpable, a sense of collective purpose and belief. The precision of its construction, with its carefully layered soils of different colors and textures, indicates a deep understanding of engineering and a profound spiritual connection to the earth itself. It's not just a pile of dirt. It's a meticulously engineered structure with profound cultural significance. One quirky tidbit about Monks Mound is how it got its modern name. It has nothing to do with the Mississippian people who built it. In the early 19th century, a community of Trappist monks briefly settled on one of the mound's terraces and farmed its lower slopes. They probably had no idea they were living on North America's largest ancient earthen structure, just a very convenient, naturally elevated piece of land. You can almost hear them thinking, well, that's a nice big hill for our monastery, isn't it? Very peaceful. A little bit of historical irony for your quiet contemplation. The mound stood silent and largely unnoticed by European settlers for centuries, slowly becoming part of the natural landscape until archaeologists began to truly understand its significance in the 20th century. It's a powerful reminder that history often hides in plain sight, waiting for us to really see it. As you mentally wander from the peak of Monks Mound, your gaze might drift towards the meticulously planned layout of the city below. You'd notice something remarkable, a profound sense of order, a deliberate arrangement that wasn't random but deeply intentional. This wasn't just a haphazard collection of dwellings. Cahokia was a planned city, and its planning reveals an astonishing understanding of cosmic alignments. Imagine standing in the central plaza, an enormous open space, feeling the sun arc across the sky. The major mounds and key features of the city were positioned with incredible precision, often aligning with important solar events like the solstices and equinoxes. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a testament to their sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Think about it. Without telescopes or advanced instruments, how did they manage such precision? It required generations of careful observation, meticulous record-keeping, and the passing down of this specialized knowledge. You might imagine priests or astronomers, perhaps even the paramount chief, marking the sunrise points on the horizon from the top of Monks Mound year after year, slowly mapping the sky onto their earthly landscape. It's the kind of dedication that makes you think, wow, they really took their sun-watching seriously, which, given its importance for agriculture and ceremony, makes perfect sense. These alignments weren't just for show. They likely played a crucial role in regulating agricultural cycles, timing important ceremonies, and reinforcing the power and legitimacy of their leaders, who were seen as connected to the cosmos. One of the most compelling examples of this cosmic precision is Woodhenge. Not Stonehenge, but Woodhenge, a series of large timber circles located just west of Monks Mound. You would notice huge, precisely placed wooden posts, much like monumental calendar markers. We'll delve into Woodhenge more deeply soon, but for now, imagine these posts as silent sentinels, marking the passage of time and the changing seasons. The very orientation of the city's major axis seems to be aligned with the rising sun at the equinoxes, further cementing this deep connection between the earth, the heavens, and human life. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these alignments was calendrical, ceremonial, or primarily political, designed to reinforce the authority of the elite. It was likely all of these things, woven together into the fabric of daily life. This focus on celestial events underscores a profound spiritual connection to the natural world. For the Cahokians, the sun, moon, and stars weren't just distant lights. They were active participants in their lives, influencing their crops, their ceremonies, and their worldview. You can almost feel the reverence in the way they constructed their city, as if the very ground beneath their feet was a canvas for their cosmic understanding. It's a beautifully intricate way of living, where every part of their existence was intertwined with the movements of the celestial bodies. No wonder they invested so much effort in aligning their enormous earthen mounds. They were, in a sense, building a living, breathing observatory. It makes you wonder how much attention we pay to the sun and stars, beyond perhaps complaining about too much or too little sunlight. They really had their priorities straight, didn't they? Stepping away from the abstract cosmic alignments, let's get a closer look at one of Cahokia's most captivating features. Picture yourself walking across the flatlands to the west of Monks Mound, and there, rising from the earth, you see a series of large, upright timber posts arranged in immense circles. These weren't just random trees. These were carefully selected. The largest and most complete Woodhenge reconstruction features 48 precisely spaced posts, forming a circle 410 feet in diameter. You might try to imagine the sheer logistical challenge of felling such massive trees, transporting them, and then erecting them with such accuracy, all without modern machinery. It's a marvel of ancient engineering and communal effort. The purpose of Woodhenge becomes clear when you observe it at specific times of the year, particularly during the solstices and equinoxes. If you were standing at the center of the circle, or at a specific observation post, you would see the sun rise directly over one of the outer posts on these significant astronomical days. For example, on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the sun would perfectly align with a designated post, signaling the turning point of the seasons. It's like a giant, ancient clock built to track the sun's journey across the sky. This precision suggests a deep, practical knowledge of astronomy, crucial for timing agricultural cycles like planting and harvesting. Imagine the relief and celebration when the sun finally hit that specific post, confirming that spring was truly on its way, or that the harvest season was upon them. Historians still argue whether the primary function of Woodhenge was purely calendrical, serving as an agricultural guide, or if it held profound ceremonial and spiritual significance. It was likely both. These alignments weren't just about knowing when to plant corn. They would have been tied into elaborate rituals and ceremonies that celebrated the sun, the earth, and the cycles of life and death. You can almost hear the chanting, the drumming, the rustle of ceremonial regalia as the first rays of the solstice sun illuminate the precise post. It was a tangible connection between the earthly realm and the celestial, reinforcing the power of the spiritual leaders who understood and interpreted these cosmic messages. One quirky detail about Woodhenge is that archaeologists have actually found evidence of multiple Woodhenge circles built at Cahokia over time, sometimes on the same spot. It suggests that as the city grew and evolved, so too did their astronomical observatories, perhaps reflecting shifts in their understanding, or simply rebuilding due to the natural decay of the timber posts. It's not just one structure, but a series of evolving observatories, each one a testament to their continuous engagement with the heavens. They probably didn't have to worry about timber rot as much as we do with our modern decks, but even giant posts eventually succumb to the elements. You might even find yourself wondering if, after one circle decayed, they just thought, well, better build an even bigger one this time. The dedication to these structures across generations speaks volumes about their importance. As you explore the subtle nuances of Cahokia, you begin to understand that it wasn't an isolated phenomenon. It was, in fact, the apex of a much broader and older tradition known as the Mississippian mound-building culture. Imagine this, scattered across the vast landscape of the American Midwest and Southeast, from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf Coast. You would have found thousands of similar, though often smaller, earthen mounds. Some were conical, like inverted bowls, others flat-topped pyramids, like those at Cahokia, and still others were effigy mounds, shaped like animals or even human figures. You might think of it as a sprawling, ancient network, connected by shared cultural practices, spiritual beliefs, and, of course, the enduring practice of moving vast quantities of earth to create monumental structures. This mound-building tradition wasn't just about building tall. It was about shaping the earth to reflect their cosmology and social order. These mounds served diverse purposes. Some were burial sites, carefully interring the dead with elaborate grave goods. Others were platforms for important buildings, like temples or elite residences, elevating the powerful closer to the heavens. Still others might have been markers for astronomical observations, much like Woodhenge, or even defensive fortifications. The sheer variety of forms and functions tells you that this was a deeply ingrained and highly versatile cultural practice. Historians still argue whether the Mississippian culture originated in one central location and spread outwards, or if it developed more or less simultaneously in different regions, sharing ideas through trade and interaction. The earliest mound builders in North America predate even the Mississippian culture, going back thousands of years. Think of sites like Poverty Point in Louisiana, which dates back to 1700 BC, featuring intricate earthworks. The Mississippian people, however, truly perfected and expanded upon this ancient tradition, bringing it to its zenith at Cahokia. They weren't just piling up dirt, they were engineering structures with surprising longevity, often incorporating different soil types and layers to ensure stability and drainage. You might chuckle, imagining a modern construction crew being told, "All right, team, no heavy machinery, just baskets and good intentions." But these ancient engineers, with their intimate knowledge of the land, clearly knew what they were doing. One quirky tidbit is that many of these mounds, even the flat-topped ones, were often built in stages over many generations. A smaller mound might be constructed, used for a period, then capped with more earth to make it larger, perhaps commemorating a new leader or a significant event. It's like a historical layered cake, each stratum telling a story of growth and change. So, when you see a mound, you're not just looking at a single act of construction, but rather a continuous process of building and rebuilding, reflecting the enduring presence and evolving practices of these ancient communities. It truly gives you a sense of the long sweep of human history, quietly unfolding beneath our feet, layer by subtle layer. From the impressive earthen architecture, let's now shift our focus to the lifeblood that pulsed through Cahokia, its extensive trade networks. Imagine the scene in the central plaza, or along the riverbanks, where goods from far-flung corners of the continent would converge. You wouldn't just find local produce. You'd encounter exotic materials, a testament to Cahokia's immense influence and reach. Think of copper originating from the shores of Lake Superior, nearly 1,000 miles to the north, meticulously hammered into ceremonial plates or intricate effigies, or perhaps seashells, particularly large conch shells, arriving from the distant Gulf Coast, prized for their beauty and used in ornaments or as trumpets in ceremonies. This wasn't merely local bartering. Cahokia sat at a pivotal geographical crossroads, allowing it to become the central hub of a highly organized and sophisticated trading system. You might see canoes arriving, piled high with finished goods or raw materials, ready to be processed by Cahokia's skilled artisans. Perhaps you'd observe a group of traders from the Appalachian Mountains. This widespread exchange wasn't just about economic gain. It was also a vital conduit for the flow of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices across vast distances. Historians still argue about the precise mechanisms of this trade, whether it was driven by elite control, reciprocal gift-giving, or a more open market system. It was likely a complex interplay of all these factors. The sheer volume and variety of goods found at Cahokia are truly astounding. Archaeologists have unearthed everything from obsidian, a volcanic glass used for incredibly sharp blades, likely sourced from distant Rocky Mountain regions, to galena, a shiny lead, or used as a pigment, coming from what is now Missouri. Imagine the intrepid journeys undertaken by these ancient traders, navigating rivers and overland trails, facing unknown dangers to bring these precious commodities back to the great city. It was a long game, for sure. You probably wouldn't have been able to order anything with next-day delivery back then, let alone next-month delivery. It required incredible resilience and a deep understanding of the natural landscape. One quirky tidbit: some of the most striking trade items are marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico. These shells, often intricately carved with images of birds, humans, or mythical creatures, weren't just decorative. They held deep spiritual significance and were often used in ritual contexts or as symbols of status. Imagine someone wearing a beautifully carved conch shell gorget, a type of pendant, instantly signaling their prestige and connection to distant, powerful forces. It's a wonderful reminder that ancient trade wasn't just about basic necessities. It was also about the exchange of luxury goods and objects imbued with profound cultural meaning, reflecting a society with developed tastes and complex beliefs. The reach of Cahokia, through these subtle whispers of distant shells and glittering minerals, stretched across a continent. With all this talk of monumental mounds and extensive trade, you might be wondering, what did the people of Cahokia actually eat? How did they sustain such a large population in a time before supermarkets and refrigeration? The answer lies largely in their ingenious adaptation to their environment and their mastery of agriculture, particularly maize cultivation. Imagine vast fields stretching out from the edges of the city, vibrant green in the summer, filled with towering stalks of corn, interspersed with other crucial crops. While they supplemented their diet with hunting and gathering, it was maize that truly formed the backbone of Cahokian sustenance. You'd see women and children tending to these fields, carefully weeding and harvesting. The adoption and intensive cultivation of maize allowed for the significant population growth that made Cahokia possible. It's a high-calorie, storable crop, providing the energy needed for both daily life and monumental construction projects. Think of it as their ancient superfood, though perhaps without the fancy packaging and celebrity endorsements. Without this reliable food source, the entire social and economic structure of Cahokia simply wouldn't have been viable. Historians still argue about the exact timing and speed of maize becoming the dominant food source in the region. But it wasn't just corn. Their diet was surprisingly varied and balanced. You would also find fields of beans, which, in a brilliant stroke of ancient agricultural wisdom, were often grown alongside corn. The beans would climb the corn stalks, using them as natural trellises, while also fixing nitrogen in the soil, enriching it for the corn, a perfect symbiotic relationship. Then there were squash and pumpkins, sprawling across the ground, providing additional nutrients and calories. These three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, were the bedrock of many indigenous American diets, offering a remarkably complete nutritional profile. You might even chuckle, imagining them explaining to a skeptical modern farmer how these three plants just help each other grow. It's a natural marvel, really. Beyond cultivated crops, the Cahokians were adept at utilizing the abundant natural resources around them. The nearby forests provided nuts like acorns, pecans, and walnuts, which would have been gathered in large quantities, especially in autumn, and stored for the leaner winter months. You might even find evidence of specialized processing areas for these nuts. And, as we touched on earlier, the rivers and streams provided an endless supply of fish. Imagine the communal fishing expeditions with nets and weirs, bringing in a haul that would feed many families. Hunting also played a role, with deer, turkey, and various small game contributing protein to their diet. It was a remarkably efficient and diverse system, a testament to their deep ecological knowledge and their ability to live off the land with remarkable skill. With a clear picture of their sustenance, let's turn our attention to the human element that made Cahokia function, its complex social hierarchy. This wasn't a simple, egalitarian village. It was a highly stratified society, with distinct classes and roles. Imagine stepping into the bustling city and observing the subtle cues that would tell you who held power and who served whom. You'd likely see individuals dressed in more elaborate attire, adorned with precious trade goods like shell beads or copper ornaments, moving with a bearing that suggested authority. These were the elites, residing in large, well-constructed homes, often situated on the tops of smaller mounds surrounding Monks Mound. At the pinnacle of this hierarchy was likely a paramount chief, or perhaps a ruling council, whose power was both political and spiritual. Their authority probably stemmed from their perceived connection to the cosmos, their ability to interpret celestial signs, and their control over valuable resources and trade networks. You might imagine elaborate ceremonies where the chief presided, their presence reinforcing the social order and the divine mandate of their rule. This kind of centralized authority was crucial for organizing the massive labor projects, like the construction of Monks Mound, and for managing the extensive trade and agricultural systems. Historians still argue whether Cahokian society was a true chiefdom, a state-level society, or something in between, as its precise political structure remains a subject of ongoing debate. Below the elites were various specialized groups. You would have the artisans, highly skilled individuals who produced the exquisite pottery, shell carvings, and copper artifacts found throughout the site. Imagine a potter meticulously shaping a clay vessel, knowing it would be used in a grand ceremony, or a craftsman carefully carving a delicate shell gorget. These were not just hobbies. These were full-time professions, suggesting a degree of economic specialization that is characteristic of complex societies. Then there were the farmers, the backbone of the population, working the fields to feed the city. You'd see them toiling in the sun, their lives intimately tied to the cycles of the seasons. Further down the social ladder, you might encounter laborers, perhaps responsible for the back-breaking work of moving earth for mound construction. Life for them would have been much harder, but still part of the communal effort that built this incredible city. One quirky tidbit about social stratification is the evidence found in burial practices. High-status individuals were often buried with elaborate grave goods, thousands of shell beads, finely crafted copper pieces, or even the remains of sacrificed individuals. A stark reminder of the power wielded by the elite. Imagine the awe and fear inspired by such displays, solidifying the social order in the minds of the living. It paints a picture of a society where your place was largely determined by birth, and where the elite commanded immense respect, if not outright veneration. You probably wouldn't have been able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps in ancient Cahokia. It was more about where your ancestors were buried. Now that we've explored the social structures, let's delve into the deeper currents of Cahokian life, their spiritual beliefs and cosmology. Imagine, as you walk through this ancient city, that every mound, every plaza, every alignment with the sun held a profound meaning, weaving together a complex tapestry of sacred understanding. For the Cahokians, the world was alive with spiritual forces, and their daily lives were intricately connected to a universe filled with powerful beings and cyclical rhythms. You wouldn't have seen a clear separation between the sacred and the mundane. Every aspect of existence was imbued with spiritual significance. At the heart of their cosmology was likely a belief in multiple levels of the cosmos, an upper world, associated with celestial bodies, birds, and powerful benevolent forces. A middle world where humans lived, a place of balance and interaction. And a lower world connected to water, darkness, and sometimes Thanic or underworld spirits. This tripartite division of the universe is common in many indigenous belief systems, and evidence for it permeates Cahokian art and iconography. You might see carvings of mythical birds representing the upper world, or serpents symbolizing the lower world, illustrating this cosmic understanding. Historians still argue about the precise pantheon of gods or spirits worshipped by the Cahokians, as written records are absent and interpretations rely on archaeological evidence and comparative studies with later Native American traditions. Their spiritual leaders, likely the paramount chief and a class of priests, would have played a crucial role in mediating between these worlds. They would have conducted ceremonies, interpreted omens, and maintained the balance of the cosmos for the well-being of the entire community. Imagine them leading rituals on the summit of Monks Mound, perhaps at dawn, invoking the sun to bless their crops and their people. The sheer theatricality and communal participation in these events would have been awe-inspiring, reinforcing shared beliefs and social cohesion. It's a bit like a grand, ancient opera, but with much higher stakes. One quirky tidbit, often seen in Mississippian iconography, is the recurring motif of the falcon or peregrine falcon. This bird, known for its speed and aerial prowess, often appears on shell gorgets, pottery, and copper plates. It's believed to be a powerful spiritual symbol, perhaps representing warriors, or serving as a messenger between the human and spirit worlds, or even embodying a celestial deity. Imagine seeing someone adorned with a beautifully carved falcon image, instantly knowing that they were connected to something powerful and transcendent. It's a subtle whisper from their spiritual landscape, a fleeting glimpse into their profound reverence for the natural world and its unseen forces. The presence of these symbols everywhere reminds you that you are not just in a city, but within a deeply spiritual landscape where every action and every structure holds a deeper meaning. From the spiritual realms, let's move to a more tangible, yet equally profound, aspect of Cahokian life: their burial practices. As you reflect on the cyclical nature of their spiritual beliefs, it's only natural to consider how they honored the transition from life to death. Burial sites at Cahokia reveal a fascinating and sometimes stark picture of their beliefs about the afterlife and their social structure. You wouldn't find simple, solitary graves. Instead, there's evidence of elaborate and diverse interments, reflecting the status of the deceased and the communal importance of the funerary rites. One of the most famous and intriguing burial sites is Mound 72, a small ridgetop mound located just south of Monks Mound. Here, archaeologists uncovered not just one or two burials, but a complex series of interments, revealing a fascinating blend of reverence and, at times, unsettling practices. At its center lay the remains of a single male, likely a higher-ranking individual, carefully placed on a bed of over 20,000 shell beads, arranged in the shape of a falcon. Remember that falcon motif we discussed? Its presence here, formed from thousands of meticulously drilled shells, speaks volumes about his status and spiritual connection. You might imagine the painstaking effort involved in preparing such a burial, each bead carefully placed by hand. It's like a quiet, glittering carpet for the journey to the next world. Surrounding this central burial were other fascinating discoveries. There were caches of over 800 finely crafted arrowheads, some made from chert sourced hundreds of miles away, along with polished copper plates and sheets of mica. These were clearly offerings meant to accompany the deceased into the spirit realm, symbolizing power, prestige, and perhaps protection. But Mound 72 also revealed a darker, more complex side. In other parts of the mound, archaeologists found mass graves containing dozens of young women, apparently sacrificed. In another section, 4 males were found with their heads and hands missing. This grim evidence suggests ritual sacrifice, perhaps to accompany the primary individual into the afterlife, or to mark a significant event. Historians still argue intensely about the interpretation of these human sacrifices, whether they were voluntary, prisoners of war, or a reflection of immense social control and spiritual devotion. It's a somber reminder of the vast differences in cultural norms across time and space. The variety of burial practices within Cahokia itself is also noteworthy. While the elites might receive elaborate mound burials, common folk would have been interred in less formal graves, perhaps in cemeteries within residential areas. This stark difference in funerary treatment serves as powerful archaeological evidence for the highly stratified society we discussed. You'd probably notice the contrast: a humble grave for one, a monumental, bead-laden resting place for another. It silently underscores the societal divisions, even in death. It's almost like they were saying, even in the afterlife, some people get the VIP treatment. A morbid joke, perhaps, but it speaks to the very human tendency to carry social structures beyond the veil of life. Having explored the somber yet fascinating realm of burials, let's brighten our focus a bit and consider the vibrant artistic expressions that permeated Cahokian life. You wouldn't just find utilitarian objects, you'd encounter a rich tapestry of creativity, evident in their pottery, shell carvings, and intricate copperwork. Imagine walking through a bustling Cahokian workshop, perhaps catching a glimpse of a master artisan at work, their hands deftly transforming raw materials into objects of beauty and profound meaning. This art wasn't just for decoration. It was deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs, social status, and daily rituals. Pottery was ubiquitous, serving both practical and ceremonial purposes. You'd see everyday cooking vessels, sturdy and functional, perhaps with simple, incised designs. But then you'd also encounter exquisitely made ceremonial pottery, thin-walled, polished, and often adorned with complex iconography. Some pieces might feature engraved images of birds, serpents, or human-like figures, perhaps depicting deities or mythical narratives. Imagine a smooth, burnished black pot, its surface gleaming, telling a story through its subtle imagery. The skill involved in shaping, firing, and decorating these vessels without modern kilns or glazes is truly remarkable. Each piece, even the mundane ones, would have been crafted by hand, carrying the unique touch of its maker. Then there are the magnificent shell carvings. We've already touched on the shell beads and the falcon burial. But the Cahokians also produced stunning shell gorgets, large, circular pendants worn around the neck. These gorgets, often made from conch shells imported from the Gulf Coast, were carved with incredibly intricate designs. You might see a dancer in an elaborate costume, a powerful warrior, or a complex, symbolic scene depicting cosmic events. Imagine the patience and precision required to carve such detail into a brittle shell using stone tools. Each line, each curve, would have been a testament to immense skill and artistic vision. These weren't just pretty trinkets. They were powerful symbols, communicating identity, status, and spiritual beliefs. Perhaps the most enigmatic and valuable art form was their copperwork. Though copper was a rare and precious material, sourced from distant regions like the Great Lakes, Cahokian artisans skillfully hammered it into thin sheets to create effigy plates. You might find a human figure with wings, a birdman, or a highly stylized animal, often with holes for attachment to clothing or a headdress. The copper would have shone brilliantly when new, catching the light and creating a striking visual presence. Historians still argue about the exact methods used for working copper, as they didn't smelt it but instead cold-hammered it into shape, requiring incredible precision and control to avoid fracturing the metal. It's almost like they were coaxing the copper into form rather than forcing it. Imagine the reverence for someone adorned with a gleaming copper plate. It would have been a truly awe-inspiring sight, clearly signifying immense power and spiritual authority. It makes you think of modern jewelry, but with far more profound historical and spiritual weight. Having admired the artistic flourishes, let's pivot to something a bit more down-to-earth, though no less fascinating: the games and recreation that would have punctuated the daily lives of Cahokians. Even in a complex, industrious society, there's always time for leisure, and the archaeological record offers glimpses into how they entertained themselves. You wouldn't have seen people glued to glowing screens, of course, but you would have witnessed lively, communal activities that brought people together, fostering social bonds, and perhaps even settling disputes in a more light-hearted way. The most famous and widely attested game played by the Mississippian people, including the Cahokians, was chunky. Imagine a level, open field, perhaps even the Grand Plaza itself, bustling with spectators. Two teams would face off. The game involved rolling a disc-shaped stone, called a chunky stone, across the ground at high speed. As the stone rolled, players would throw long wooden spears or poles at the point where they predicted the stone would stop. Points were awarded based on how close a spear landed to the stopped stone. You can almost hear the shouts of encouragement, the groans of disappointment, and the satisfying thud of a spear hitting close to the mark. It sounds simple, but it required immense skill, precision, and quick judgment. Chunky was more than just a game. It held significant social and perhaps even ritualistic importance. It was played by men, often with high stakes, and the chunky stones themselves were finely polished, sometimes intricately carved, and highly prized. Finding one of these smooth, hand-sized stones on an archaeological dig is like finding a carefully crafted sports trophy. Imagine the pride of a skilled, chunky player, revered for their athletic prowess. Historians still argue about the precise ceremonial significance of chunky, with some theories suggesting it reenacted mythological events or served as a metaphor for cosmic struggles. It was serious fun, to be sure. Beyond chunky, evidence suggests other forms of recreation. Children, as always, would have found ways to play, perhaps with simple toys made of clay or wood. You might have seen young ones mimicking the adults, practicing with miniature bows and arrows, or chasing each other through the fields. Adults, too, would have engaged in storytelling around evening fires, sharing myths, histories, and humorous anecdotes. Music, using drums, flutes made from bone or cane, and rattles, would have been an integral part of both ceremonies and social gatherings. Imagine the hypnotic rhythm of the drums carrying across the Cahokian night, a soundtrack to their lives. One quirky tidbit related to chunky: some ethnographic accounts from later Native American groups suggest that gambling was a very strong component of the game, with players sometimes betting all their possessions, even their wives or children, on the outcome. While this might seem extreme to us, It highlights the intense social and economic significance that games could hold in these societies. It reminds you that even leisure activities can carry profound weight, shaping social dynamics and reflecting cultural values. So, if you ever find yourself in ancient Cahokia, maybe just enjoy the game as a spectator, rather than putting your best ear ornament on the line. From the playful pursuits of Chunky, let's now consider the backbone of Cahokia's material culture and economic prowess: craft specialization. This wasn't a society where every family made everything they needed. Instead, Cahokia boasted a class of highly skilled artisans who dedicated their lives to producing specific goods, contributing to the city's wealth and influence. Imagine walking past a series of small workshops, each humming with a different kind of activity: the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a flint, the soft scrape of a shell carver, or the methodical shaping of a potter's clay. This division of labor is a hallmark of complex societies, allowing for greater efficiency and the production of higher quality goods. Think about the flint knappers, the masters of stone tools. You would observe them sitting, perhaps surrounded by piles of chert nodules, striking off flakes with precise blows, gradually shaping them into razor-sharp arrowheads, spear points, and scrapers. The skill involved in transforming a raw stone into a functional and aesthetically pleasing tool is immense, requiring years of practice and an intimate understanding of the material. A truly skilled flint knapper could produce a blade so sharp it could rival modern surgical scalpels. They were the ancient world's equivalent of precision engineers, crafting the essential implements for hunting, agriculture, and daily life. Historians still argue about the extent to which these workshops were organized, whether they were individual family enterprises or centrally controlled by the Cahokian elite. Then there were the potters. We've already admired their artistic output, but the process itself was a specialized craft. Imagine them carefully preparing the clay, perhaps tempering it with crushed shell or sand to prevent cracking during firing. You'd see them coiling, pinching, and smoothing the clay into various forms, from large storage jars to delicate ceremonial bowls. Firing the pottery would have been a communal effort, using open fires or shallow pits, requiring careful management of heat to achieve the desired hardness and finish. The uniformity and quality of Cahokian pottery found across the region suggest a significant degree of standardization, indicating professional production rather than just casual home crafts. And, of course, the shell and copper artisans. As we discussed, these were precious materials, and their transformation into exquisite ornaments and ritual objects required immense skill and patience. Imagine a craftsman carefully grinding and drilling shell beads, or painstakingly carving intricate designs onto a conch shell. For the copper workers, it was even more specialized. They didn't melt the copper, but rather painstakingly hammered cold pieces into desired shapes, a technique that demanded incredible precision to avoid shattering the brittle metal. You might even hear the faint, rhythmic sound of a stone hammer striking a copper sheet, slowly coaxing it into the form of a bird or a human figure. These objects, often imbued with spiritual significance, were not merely functional. They were works of art, produced by masters. You wouldn't just pick up a shell gorget from a roadside stand. These were high-value, bespoke items. After appreciating the intricate work of the Cahokian artisans, let's now consider a broader, more existential challenge that loomed over their thriving city: environmental impact. Even in ancient times, human societies profoundly shaped their surroundings. And Cahokia, with its massive population and extensive resource needs, was no exception. Imagine the vast forests that once surrounded the city, slowly receding as timber was felled for construction, fuel, and daily needs. You wouldn't have seen clear-cut industrial logging, but the cumulative effect of thousands of people relying on wood would have been undeniable. Think of the sheer amount of timber required just for the construction of buildings. The large, rectangular houses, often with thatched roofs, would have demanded countless logs and smaller branches. Then there was the ongoing need for firewood, essential for cooking, heating homes in winter, and firing pottery. If you were living there, you'd probably notice the gathering parties venturing further and further out from the city to find suitable trees. This constant demand would have put immense pressure on the local forest ecosystems. It's a bit like imagining a slow, ancient deforestation project, driven not by profit, but by the sheer scale of urban life. Historians still argue about the precise degree of environmental degradation caused by Cahokian activity and how much it contributed to their eventual decline. Beyond timber, consider the impact of their extensive agricultural practices. While their Three Sisters farming system was incredibly efficient, the continuous cultivation of large fields, even with natural fertilization from the river, would have inevitably led to some soil degradation over time. You might observe areas where the soil looked less fertile, or where erosion was beginning to take its toll, particularly on sloped land near the river. The concentration of so many people also meant a significant amount of waste, though organic waste would have largely been recycled naturally. Still, maintaining sanitation for such a large urban center without modern infrastructure would have been a continuous, if mostly unseen, challenge. One quirky tidbit relates to the sheer volume of earth moved for mound construction. While not environmental impact in the sense of depletion, the reshaping of the landscape on such a grand scale fundamentally altered the local topography and hydrology. Imagine the small streams and wetlands being diverted or filled in to accommodate new mounds or plazas. This immense landscaping project would have had downstream effects on water flow and local ecosystems, something the Cahokians, with their intimate knowledge of the land, would have been acutely aware of, even if they didn't frame it in modern ecological terms. It's almost like they were playing God with the landscape, gently but persistently reshaping it to fit their needs and spiritual beliefs. The quiet power of human hands, moving earth basket by basket, slowly but profoundly altering the very ground beneath their feet. Having considered the environmental pressures, let's now delve deeper into the solutions the Cahokians devised to feed their immense population, their remarkable agricultural innovations. You might picture simple scratching at the soil, but their farming techniques were surprisingly sophisticated, particularly given the lack of modern tools. Imagine walking through those sprawling fields we mentioned earlier, seeing the evidence of careful planning and sustained effort that allowed them to produce the massive surpluses necessary to sustain a city of tens of thousands. The cornerstone of their agricultural success, as we noted, was maize cultivation. But it wasn't just planting seeds and hoping for the best. The Cahokians likely developed and utilized strains of corn specifically adapted to their local climate and soil conditions. Robust varieties that yielded abundant harvests. You might observe rows planted with careful spacing, perhaps even evidence of mounding the earth around individual plants to improve drainage and warmth. Technique still used by some traditional farmers today. This isn't just guesswork. It's the result of generations of accumulated knowledge. Historians still argue about the exact timing of the full adoption of high-yield maize varieties in the Mississippian core, and how rapidly it led to population aggregation at Cahokia. Beyond maize, the integrated system of the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, was a truly brilliant innovation in sustainable agriculture. Imagine the bean vines gracefully climbing the strong corn stalks, reaching for the sunlight, while at the base, squash plants sprawl, their broad leaves shading the soil, conserving moisture and suppressing weeds. And the magic of the beans isn't just their climbing ability. They're legumes, which means their roots host bacteria that fix nitrogen from the air into the soil, essentially acting as natural fertilizers for the nitrogen-hungry corn. It's an ecological masterclass, a self-sustaining system that allowed for continuous cultivation without rapidly depleting soil nutrients. You might think, well, that's smarter than half the things we do today, and you'd probably be right. Furthermore, the Cahokians likely employed techniques to manage water, particularly in the fertile floodplains of the Mississippi. While large-scale irrigation systems, like those in arid regions, aren't evident, they would have understood and utilized the natural rhythms of the river, perhaps building small dikes or directing natural overflow channels to maximize soil fertility and water availability. The very layout of their city, nestled against the river, speaks to this intimate relationship with water. One quirky tidbit: there's archaeological evidence of ridged fields in some Mississippian sites, where farmers created raised beds to improve drainage in low-lying wet areas, effectively transforming marshy land into productive farmland. Imagine the immense effort involved in creating such complex field systems by hand, reshaping the earth to perfectly suit their agricultural needs. It speaks volumes about their ingenuity and commitment to feeding their thriving city, turning natural challenges into opportunities for growth. From the intricacies of their farming, let's now shift our gaze to a different aspect of Cahokian life, one that hints at potential conflict and the need for protection. Their defensive structures. While Cahokia was a flourishing trade hub, it was also a major power center, and such prominence often came with the need for security. Imagine, as you approach the core of the city, encountering a formidable palisade wall, a towering fence made of massive logs, standing as a silent sentinel. This wasn't just a simple barrier. It was a significant undertaking, revealing a concern for defense. The most prominent defensive feature was a massive wooden palisade that encircled the central ceremonial precinct of Cahokia, including Monks Mound and the Grand Plaza. Picture thousands of large, closely set logs, standing upright, sharpened at the top, forming a continuous wall, roughly 2 miles long. It wasn't built all at once. Archaeological evidence suggests it was constructed in several phases, possibly rebuilt multiple times. This indicates a persistent need for defense, or at least a perceived threat. Imagine the collective effort involved in felling those trees, hauling them to the site, digging deep post holes, and then erecting them into such a formidable barrier. It was a massive civic project, consuming enormous resources and labor. You might wonder if it was built quickly in response to an immediate threat, or gradually as a show of strength. Historians still argue about the exact nature of the threats that necessitated such a massive defensive structure, whether they were internal rebellions, external tribal conflicts, or simply a display of elite power and control. Beyond the palisade itself, there's evidence of watchtowers or bastions strategically placed along its length, allowing defenders to observe approaching dangers and potentially fire arrows from a protected position. You might imagine sentries posted there, scanning the horizon, ever vigilant. The palisade wasn't just a physical barrier. It was also a psychological one, clearly delineating the sacred and powerful core of the city from the surrounding residential areas and beyond. It separated the elite from the commoners, perhaps reinforcing the social hierarchy we discussed earlier. It's a stark reminder that even in seemingly tranquil ancient societies, there was often an underlying current of tension or the need for protection. One quirky tidbit: the palisade, being made of wood, would have required constant maintenance and periodic rebuilding due to rot and decay. Imagine the ongoing labor of replacing sections, much like constantly mending a fence, but on a grand, urban scale. This wasn't a one-and-done project. It was a perpetual commitment. It probably felt like a never-ending chore, especially after a particularly harsh winter. It's a testament to the community's dedication to their city's security, illustrating that the very act of maintaining these defenses was itself a significant part of their daily life and resource allocation. The sheer scale of the palisade suggests a very real concern, a shadow lurking in the otherwise bustling and vibrant city life. Having explored the protective palisade, let's now consider one of the most potent, yet invisible, forces that may have contributed to Cahokia's eventual decline: climate change. You might imagine climate change as a modern problem, but shifts in global weather patterns have influenced human societies throughout history. For the Cahokians, whose lives were so intimately tied to agriculture, even subtle changes in temperature or rainfall could have had profound consequences. Imagine longer, harsher winters or prolonged droughts that withered their maize crops, gradually eroding their ability to feed their vast population. Around the time Cahokia began to experience its decline, roughly from the 13th to the 14th centuries, the Earth was entering a period known as the Little Ice Age. While not a true ice age, it was a period characterized by cooler global temperatures, particularly in the northern hemisphere, often accompanied by more variable and extreme weather events. You wouldn't have seen glaciers advancing into their fields overnight, but you might have noticed shorter growing seasons, more frequent crop failures due to frost, or unpredictable floods and droughts. For a society so dependent on consistent agricultural surpluses, even a slight downturn in productivity could have created significant stress. Historians still argue about the precise impact of the Little Ice Age on Cahokia, and whether it was a primary driver of decline or a contributing factor among many. Think about the domino effect. If maize yields declined, it would directly impact the city's ability to feed its large population. Fewer calories mean less energy for labor-intensive projects like mound building or palisade maintenance. It could also lead to food shortages, increasing social unrest and competition for dwindling resources. You might imagine the whispers of discontent growing louder in the city as the once reliable harvest became increasingly uncertain. It's a very human story. When food is scarce, societies often face their greatest challenges. One quirky tidbit related to climate shifts is the potential impact on the Mississippi River itself. Cooler temperatures could have led to changes in river flow patterns, perhaps affecting fish populations or making navigation more difficult for trade. Imagine the frustration of traders finding water levels too low for their laden canoes. disrupting the vital supply lines that fed the city with exotic goods. It's a subtle shift, yet one that could have slowly tightened its grip on the Cahokian way of life, an invisible hand guiding their fate. While they were masters of their environment, they were not immune to the planet's larger rhythms. Even the most organized society can struggle when Mother Nature decides to throw a few unexpected curveballs. Building on the notion of environmental stress, let's consider another potential factor in Cahokia's decline: resource depletion. While the Cahokians were adept at managing their environment, the sheer scale of their city and its demands placed immense pressure on local resources. Imagine the forests, once sprawling and dense, becoming increasingly sparse as the city grew. You wouldn't witness an apocalyptic wasteland, but a gradual thinning, a quiet shrinking of the wilderness around them. The most immediate and obvious resource under pressure would have been timber. We discussed its use for buildings and fuel, but consider also the vast amounts of wood needed for their palisade walls, for tool handles, for canoes, and for ceremonial objects. With a population that likely peaked at tens of thousands, the demand for wood would have been enormous and continuous. You might picture gathering parties, having to travel further and further from the city to find suitable trees, increasing the labor and time invested in acquiring this vital resource. This ever-expanding search radius would have made daily life, particularly for those responsible for gathering, increasingly arduous. Historians still argue about the exact rate of deforestation around Cahokia and its direct contribution to the city's abandonment. Beyond timber, the concentration of such a large population would have had an impact on local wildlife populations. While their diet was heavily reliant on maize, hunting still provided crucial protein. You might notice that deer, turkey, and other large game became scarcer in the immediate vicinity of the city, forcing hunters to venture into more distant territories. This depletion would not only affect their food supply, but also the availability of hides, bones, and feathers used for clothing, tools, and ceremonial regalia. It's a classic ecological squeeze. Too many people in one place, too much reliance on finite local resources. One quirky tidbit relates to the very earth itself. While they moved vast quantities of soil for mound construction, this wasn't necessarily depletion in the conventional sense, but rather a massive redistribution of resources. However, the constant activity, the large numbers of people, and the intense agriculture would have put pressure on local water sources and the soil itself. Imagine the cumulative effect of thousands of footsteps, repeated cultivation, and the natural forces of erosion gradually altering the landscape. It's a subtle form of resource degradation, less dramatic than a sudden famine, but equally potent in its long-term effects. It's like a very slow, very large, ancient consumption machine, steadily working its way through the local environment. Beyond the environmental stresses, let's explore another, silent, yet devastating, force that could have impacted Cahokia: disease and health. When large numbers of people gather in urban centers, even ancient ones, the conditions become ripe for the spread of illness. Imagine the close quarters of Cahokian homes, the shared communal spaces, and the basic sanitation practices of the time. You wouldn't have seen hospitals or pharmacies and medical knowledge, while rooted in centuries of herbal and spiritual practice, was vastly different from our own. The shift to a largely maize-based diet, while providing abundant calories, also came with potential health drawbacks. While nutritious, a diet heavily reliant on a single crop can lead to nutritional deficiencies if not properly balanced. You might observe signs of anemia or other nutrient-related ailments in skeletal remains. Furthermore, the consumption of maize also has a higher risk of contributing to dental issues due to its sugars and the gritty nature of ground corn, even if cooked. Imagine the widespread discomfort of toothaches and infections without modern dentistry. It certainly wouldn't have been a fun way to spend your afternoon. Historians still argue about the precise impact of dietary changes on the overall health and susceptibility to disease within the Cahokian population. Perhaps even more critically, the sheer density of the population in Cahokia would have created ideal conditions for the transmission of infectious diseases. Common ailments that might be mild in smaller, dispersed communities could become devastating epidemics in a crowded city. You can imagine respiratory illnesses, gastrointestinal infections, or other contagious diseases sweeping through the population, particularly among the young and the elderly, who are often more vulnerable. There would have been no understanding of germs, no antibiotics, and limited methods to quarantine the sick effectively. It's a sobering thought, visualizing a silent, unseen enemy moving through the bustling streets. One quirky tidbit is the potential for parasitic infections to spread rapidly in such an environment. Without modern plumbing and waste disposal systems, water sources could easily become contaminated, leading to outbreaks of parasitic worms or other waterborne illnesses. Imagine the invisible threat lurking in the very water they drank, slowly weakening the population. While archaeology doesn't give us perfect insight into every cough or fever, skeletal evidence can sometimes reveal signs of chronic infections, nutritional stress, and childhood illnesses. This silent toll on the population, a constant battle against unseen pathogens, could have gradually weakened the city from within, making it more vulnerable to other stresses. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats are the ones you can't see, hear, or fight with a palisade. Beyond the silent scourges of disease and environmental pressures, let's consider another potential factor in Cahokia's decline: internal strife theories. Imagine the immense social hierarchy we discussed, with powerful elites at the top and a large population of commoners and laborers at the bottom. Such a system, while capable of great achievements, also carries the seeds of potential unrest. You wouldn't necessarily see massive, organized rebellions in the archaeological record, but subtle clues might hint at growing tensions within the city. The sheer concentration of power and wealth in the hands of a few could have created resentment among the general populace. Think of the enormous labor demands for building Monks Mound and the palisade, work that required immense communal effort, but whose direct benefits might have primarily accrued to the elite. You might imagine whispers of discontent circulating through the commoner neighborhoods, as people tired of endless labor or felt their contributions weren't adequately recognized. While we have no written records of strikes or protests, the human capacity for frustration and yearning for fairness is universal. Historians still argue about the extent of social cohesion or internal conflict within Cahokian society, as direct evidence is scarce and open to interpretation. Archaeological evidence, while not conclusive, sometimes offers tantalizing hints. For instance, the very existence of the massive palisade wall, which we discussed earlier, could be interpreted not only as a defense against external enemies, but also as a way to control and delineate the internal population. Imagine it as a physical manifestation of social boundaries, perhaps even a way to manage access to the elite precinct. If there were periods of internal unrest, perhaps minor rebellions or challenges to authority, a strong defensive perimeter around the core of power would have been a logical response. It's a bit like a very large, very ancient gated community, but perhaps with more serious implications for those on the outside. One quirky tidbit comes from the observation that the size and number of individual residences appear to decrease in later periods of Cahokia's occupation. While the population density remains high, this could suggest a decline in living standards for commoners, or increased crowding, which in turn could fuel social discontent. Imagine more families crammed into smaller spaces, leading to increased friction and stress in daily life. This isn't definitive proof of rebellion, of course, but it paints a picture of growing pressure on the average Cahokian resident. It's a subtle archaeological whisper, hinting at potential friction beneath the surface of what outwardly appeared to be a thriving metropolis. The powerful monuments of Cahokia tell a story of unity and organization, but perhaps also of the underlying tensions that come with concentrated power. While internal tensions might have simmered, let's also consider another significant possibility for Cahokia's decline: external pressures. Imagine a world beyond the immediate influence of the great city, a landscape populated by other groups, sometimes allies, sometimes rivals. Even the most powerful urban center is rarely entirely isolated, and interactions with neighboring peoples, whether peaceful or hostile, could have profoundly shaped Cahokia's fate. The region surrounding Cahokia was not empty. It was populated by various other Mississippian and non-Mississippian groups, some of whom may have seen Cahokia's power and wealth with a mixture of awe and envy. You might envision raiding parties from distant tribes, drawn by the prospect of resources, or perhaps seeking to challenge Cahokia's dominance. The impressive palisade wall, which we've discussed, serves as strong evidence that the Cahokians felt a real need for defense against some form of threat. Whether these threats were continuous low-level skirmishes or more organized attacks from emerging regional rivals remains a topic of scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether sustained warfare with external groups contributed significantly to Cahokia's decline, or if it was merely a periodic inconvenience. Consider the possibility of shifts in the broader regional power dynamics. Perhaps new groups emerged further up or down the Mississippi River, challenging Cahokia's control over trade routes or resources. You might imagine competition over prime hunting grounds or access to valuable chert quarries for tools. If rival polities grew in strength, they could have siphoned off some of Cahokia's tributary communities, or simply disrupted the flow of goods that was so vital to the city's economy. A powerful neighbor can be both a trading partner and a potential adversary. One quirky tidbit relates to the potential for large-scale migrations into or out of the Cahokia region. While direct evidence is scarce, shifts in population patterns among surrounding groups could have either bolstered Cahokia or put additional strain on its resources. Imagine a large group of people moving into the area, seeking refuge or simply new lands, potentially leading to competition with the established Cahokian populace. Or, conversely, smaller groups steadily departing for new opportunities elsewhere, gradually reducing Cahokia's workforce and influence. It's like a very slow, ancient game of demographic chess, with invisible pieces moving across the landscape. The narrative of a sudden, dramatic attack is often appealing, but the reality of ancient societal shifts was likely far more nuanced and gradual, a subtle interplay of environmental, internal, and external pressures slowly reshaping the landscape of power. Now, having considered the various pressures, let's confront the ultimate mystery surrounding Cahokia, its mysterious abandonment. Imagine this grand city, once teeming with life, slowly, subtly, becoming quieter. The bustling plazas would grow less crowded, the fires fewer, the distant sounds of daily life fading to a murmur, and then, eventually, to silence. This wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic event, no evidence of a massive invasion that wiped out the population, no widespread signs of a devastating natural disaster that instantly emptied the city. Instead, the evidence points to a gradual, protracted depopulation. You wouldn't have woken up one morning to an empty city. It was a slow bleed, a quiet exodus that unfolded over generations. Archaeological data indicates that Cahokia's peak population, likely tens of thousands, began to decline in the 13th century, and by the mid-14th century, the site was largely abandoned. The massive labor projects, like mound building and palisade construction, ceased. The extensive trade networks, which once brought goods from across the continent, dwindled. You might imagine families, one by one, deciding to leave, seeking new opportunities, better land, or perhaps simply escape from the stresses of urban life. Where did they go? Some likely dispersed into smaller, more sustainable agricultural communities across the Mississippian world, taking their knowledge and cultural practices with them. Others may have migrated to new regions entirely. Historians still argue intensely about the primary cause or combination of causes that led to Cahokia's abandonment, with various theories vying for prominence. The absence of dramatic destruction is key here. It suggests that the city wasn't conquered or annihilated. Rather, it was simply no longer sustainable or desirable for its inhabitants. Perhaps the environmental degradation we discussed, combined with the pressures of climate change, made large-scale agriculture increasingly difficult. Or maybe internal strife and external pressures made living in such a concentrated settlement too precarious. You might even consider a shift in religious or political ideology, leading people to abandon the old ways and seek new spiritual centers. It's a bit like a complex puzzle, with many missing pieces, and each theory offers a plausible, yet incomplete, explanation. One quirky tidbit lies in the very memory of Cahokia among later indigenous peoples. When European explorers and settlers first arrived in the region centuries later, the grand mounds were often overgrown with trees, appearing as natural hills, while some local Native American groups had oral traditions that hinted at ancient, powerful cities. The true scale and identity of Cahokia had largely faded from collective memory. Imagine walking over the vast, silent Monks Mound, assuming it was just another hill, completely oblivious to the millions of basketloads of earth, the rituals, the lives, and the stories it held. It's a profound testament to the quiet, sometimes almost imperceptible, way that time and nature reclaim even the grandest human endeavors. The city simply dissolved back into the landscape, its story awaiting rediscovery by a different people centuries later. As Cahokia slowly faded into the landscape, its bustling life replaced by the rustle of leaves and the calls of birds, the region it once dominated certainly didn't become a void. Instead, what emerged was a post-Cahokia landscape, a transformed world where human presence continued, but in very different forms. Imagine the once dense population dispersing, the grand urban experiment giving way to smaller, more scattered communities, adapting to a new reality. You wouldn't find another city of Cahokia's scale emerging in the immediate vicinity, but rather a pattern of smaller, more resilient settlements. Many of the former Cahokian residents, or their descendants, likely moved to new locations, establishing villages that were more self-sufficient and less reliant on the kind of centralized power that characterized Cahokia. You might envision groups migrating up and down the Mississippi and its tributaries, forming new communities based on farming, hunting, and local trade. These groups might have maintained some aspects of Mississippian culture, their pottery styles, their agricultural techniques, perhaps even fragments of their spiritual beliefs, but adapted them to a decentralized existence. The memory of the great city, though perhaps distorted over generations, would have persisted in their oral traditions, a faint echo of past glory. Historians still argue about the precise migratory patterns and the degree of cultural continuity between Cahokian populations and later historical Native American groups in the region. The vast earthworks of Cahokia, including Monks Mound and the smaller platforms, didn't simply disappear. They slowly became overgrown, softened by the elements, and in many cases, integrated into the natural landscape. You might see trees growing on the slopes of the mounds, their roots, slowly but surely, binding the ancient earth. The plazas, once meticulously swept and maintained, would gradually be reclaimed by tall grasses, and eventually, forests. It's a powerful visual of nature, patiently reasserting its dominance over human endeavor, transforming monumental architecture back into gentle hills. It's a subtle kind of transformation, like watching a very, very slow-motion time-lapse of a city dissolving into the earth. One quirky tidbit is how later indigenous peoples in the area might have used or interacted with the abandoned mounds. While the city itself was gone, the mounds remained, often serving as prominent landmarks in a changing landscape. You might imagine smaller hunting parties camping near them, or travelers using them as navigational points. Some mounds might have been reoccupied for brief periods, or even served as burial grounds for later groups, layering new histories upon the ancient ones. It's a testament to the enduring presence of these earthworks, standing as silent witnesses to centuries of human activity, long after their original purpose had faded from living memory. They are not just archaeological sites, they are profound, layered landscapes of human history, waiting for us to understand their many stories. Now, after centuries of quietude, where Cahokia's grand structures lay hidden beneath layers of earth and vegetation, let's fast forward to its modern rediscovery and the dawn of archaeological investigation. Imagine the early European settlers and explorers arriving in the region, encountering these strange, earthen hills. For a long time, they were often simply considered natural features, perhaps small mountains or peculiar knolls, rather than the remnants of an immense ancient city. You wouldn't find anyone immediately grasping the monumental scale of what lay beneath their feet. It took time, observation, and dedicated scholarship to unveil Cahokia's true identity. One of the earliest and most significant encounters was in the early 1800s, when the aforementioned Trappist monks briefly settled on Monks Mound, giving it its modern, somewhat misleading name. But even they didn't fully comprehend the vast human effort that created their hill. It wasn't until the mid-19th century that more systematic observations began. Early antiquarians, often hobbyists or curious individuals, started to document the mounds, realizing their artificial nature. You might imagine one of them, with a furrowed brow and a notebook in hand, sketching the outlines of the mounds, wondering aloud about their origins. Their early descriptions, while sometimes inaccurate by modern standards, were crucial first steps in bringing Cahokia into the realm of recorded history. Historians still argue about the motivations and biases of these early antiquarians, and how their interpretations sometimes shaped later archaeological narratives. The true scientific investigation of Cahokia, however, really began in the early 20th century and intensified dramatically in the mid to late 20th century with the advent of modern archaeological methods. Imagine archaeologists meticulously mapping the site, digging test pits, and carefully sifting through layers of soil, unearthing pottery shards, tools, and human remains. This painstaking work, layer by quiet layer, slowly began to reveal the immense complexity and scale of the ancient city. It was like piecing together a colossal jigsaw puzzle, with each unearthed artifact adding another clue to Cahokia's story. One quirky tidbit about this rediscovery phase is the role of aerial photography. When viewed from above, the subtle outlines of Cahokia's ancient urban plazas, the residential areas, and the alignments of the mounds became much more apparent, revealing a level of organization that was nearly invisible from the ground. Imagine an early aviator flying over the seemingly natural landscape, suddenly noticing the geometric patterns etched into the earth below, realizing they were looking at the ghostly imprint of a forgotten city. It was a groundbreaking perspective that transformed our understanding of Cahokia from a collection of curious mounds into a sophisticated, planned metropolis. This overhead view truly brought the lost city back to life, at least in the minds of the researchers. With the rediscovery of Cahokia came a new challenge, the imperative of preservation. Imagine a priceless, ancient manuscript found after centuries, but slowly crumbling. That's a bit like Cahokia. While its monumental earthworks have endured for centuries, they are vulnerable to the elements, to modern development, and to the ravages of time. You wouldn't want such an important piece of North American history to simply erode away or be bulldozed for a shopping mall, would you? The efforts to protect and conserve Cahokia for future generations have been a continuous, often uphill, battle. One of the primary challenges is its location. Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site is nestled amidst modern, urban, and suburban development in Collinsville, Illinois, just across the Mississippi River from St. Louis. Imagine the constant pressure from encroaching roads, housing developments, and agricultural practices that could inadvertently damage or destroy undisturbed archaeological remains. This proximity to modern life means a delicate balance must be struck between preservation and allowing for necessary growth. You might see a busy highway just a stone's throw from an ancient mound, a stark contrast between ancient grandeur and modern hustle. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of early preservation efforts, which sometimes involved methodologies that by today's standards might be considered less than ideal. Another significant challenge is simply the fragility of earthen architecture. Unlike stone pyramids or brick structures, earth mounds are susceptible to erosion from rain and wind, to the burrowing of animals, and to the growth of vegetation whose roots can destabilize the mounds. Imagine a team of dedicated conservators meticulously working to stabilize slopes, improve drainage, and carefully remove invasive plants, all to slow the natural process of decay. It's a continuous, painstaking effort, like constantly tending a very large, very old garden. They're not just preserving dirt, they're preserving history. One quirky tidbit related to preservation is the early practice of farming on the mounds themselves. Before their historical significance was fully understood, many of the smaller mounds were plowed over by farmers, thinking they were just natural, elevated fields. Imagine generations of plows, slowly but surely, flattening archaeological features, unknowingly erasing parts of the ancient city. It's a testament to how easily history can be lost when its value isn't recognized. Today, strict regulations and dedicated archaeological teams work tirelessly to prevent further damage and to interpret and protect what remains. The designation of Cahokia Mounds as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982 was a crucial step, bringing international recognition and support to these vital preservation efforts, ensuring that this quiet giant of history continues to stand, softly whispering its stories to those who visit. As our journey through the echoes of Cahokia draws to a close, let's consider its enduring legacy. You might think of it as just a collection of ancient dirt mounds in the American heartland, but Cahokia is so much more. It stands as a profound testament to the ingenuity, complexity, more nuanced understanding of North American history. Imagine a silent, majestic monument whispering its secrets across the centuries, reminding us that greatness bloomed on this continent long before European arrival. Before Cahokia, popular historical narratives often overlooked the sophisticated urban centers and complex social structures that existed in North America. Cahokia shatters that misconception. It demonstrates that the people of the Mississippian culture were master engineers, astronomers, artists, and organizers, capable of building and sustaining a metropolis on a scale comparable to, or even larger than, many contemporary European cities. You wouldn't just be looking at a ruin, you'd be witnessing the tangible evidence of a thriving, dynamic civilization that adapted to its environment with remarkable skill and creativity. Historians still argue about the precise extent of Cahokia's influence on later indigenous cultures. Its legacy extends beyond mere facts and figures. Cahokia provides a crucial link to the ancestral heritage of numerous contemporary Native American nations. For many indigenous peoples, Cahokia is not just an archaeological site, but a sacred place, a tangible connection to their deep roots on this continent. You might imagine tribal members visiting the mounds, feeling a profound sense of connection to their ancestors, listening to the quiet echoes of their history. It's a living heritage, a source of pride and identity, reminding us that history is not just about the past, but about the enduring present. One quirky tidbit: the very act of preserving and studying Cahokia continues to reveal new insights, constantly refining our understanding. It's not a static story, it's an evolving narrative, with new discoveries, challenging old theories, and adding fresh layers of detail. Imagine archaeologists, even today, unearthing a new artifact, or using cutting-edge technology to scan beneath the surface of a mound, uncovering yet another piece of this grand puzzle. The story of Cahokia continues to be written, slowly, patiently, through the dedicated work of scientists and the shared wisdom of descendant communities. It's a quiet, persistent reminder that even the most ancient histories still have new tales to tell, if only we take the time to listen, to observe, and to truly understand. Now, as the last remnants of our journey through Cahokia begin to fade from your mind's eye. Allow yourself to simply drift. The great mounds, now soft hills in the moonlight, stand as silent sentinels of a forgotten time. The whispers of ancient lives, the rhythmic thud of the chunky stone, the gentle lapping of the river all, are settling into a soft hum. The complexities of ancient civilizations, their triumphs and their quiet disappearances, are stories best contemplated in the gentle stillness of night. Let the vastness of human history and the quiet resilience of the earth itself lull you into a deep and restful sleep. Rest easy now, knowing that even in the forgotten corners of time, there was profound wonder and quiet grandeur.